The city is already dying. It is late April 1945. Berlin is a shattered carcass of stone and smoke, its streets choked with rubble, its skyline torn open by fire. The air trembles constantly, artillery in the distance, machine gun fire echoing through hollow buildings, the low roar of engines advancing from every direction. Civilians huddle in cellars as the ground shakes above them. Soldiers, some hardened, some barely trained, wait behind broken walls, knowing the war has reached its final, merciless chapter. This is the end of the Third Reich, and it will be written street by street, room by room, life by life. To understand how Berlin came to this moment, one must look beyond the ruins to the war closing in from all sides. By early 1945, Nazi Germany was finished in all but name. In the West, Allied armies had crossed the Rhine and were pushing deep into German territory. Cities fell one after another, supply lines collapsed, the Luftwaffe was broken, the once feared Wehrmacht was exhausted, undermanned, and running on desperation. But it was in the East that the reckoning moved with unstoppable force. The Red Army, hardened by years of brutal fighting and fueled by a thirst for vengeance, surged westward. Entire German armies had been annihilated on the Eastern Front. Soviet losses were staggering, millions dead, but their momentum was absolute. By January, Soviet forces stood on the Oder River, less than 70 kilometers from Berlin. The capital was exposed. Inside the city, Adolf Hitler remained in his bunker beneath the Reichschancellery, surrounded by maps that no longer reflected reality. His generals argued, pleaded, and lied. Orders were issued for divisions that did not exist, counterattacks by units already destroyed. Reality was unwelcome underground. Yet Hitler refused to leave. Berlin, he declared, would be defended to the last man. As Soviet forces prepared their final assault, Berlin was transformed into a fortress. Anti-tank obstacles were erected in the streets. Barricades rose from tramcars and debris. Bridges were wired for demolition. Anyone capable of holding a weapon was pressed into service. Elderly men of the Volkssturm, teenage boys from the Hitler Youth, wounded veterans pulled back into the line. The city's defenders were a patchwork of loyalty, fear, and inevitability. On April 16, 1945, the battle began. Before dawn, the sky to the east ignited. Thousands of Soviet guns opened fire simultaneously, unleashing one of the most intense artillery bombardments in history. The earth shook as shells screamed overhead, pulverizing German positions along the Seelow Heights, the last major defensive line before Berlin. The Germans fought fiercely, but they were overwhelmed by sheer numbers and firepower. When the Soviet breakthrough came, it was decisive. Armored columns poured forward, infantry followed, advancing through smoke and mud, stepping over bodies that marked the cost of every meter gained. By April 20th, Hitler's birthday, Soviet artillery began shelling Berlin itself. Inside the city, panic spread. Buildings collapsed under bombardment, fires burned unchecked, water and electricity failed. Civilians fled deeper underground, clutching what little they had left. Above them, the battle took on a savage intimacy. This was no longer war across open fields. This was urban annihilation. Soviet troops advanced block by block, clearing basements, stairwells, attics. Every apartment became a potential strongpoint. German defenders fought from windows, from sewers, from behind rubble. Snipers turned ruins into death traps. Tanks rolled forward at point-blank range, blasting buildings apart to eliminate resistance. The city bled. The fighting was relentless, exhausting, and deeply personal. For Soviet soldiers, Berlin was the final prize after years of suffering. For German defenders, it was a last stand shaped by fear fear of defeat, fear of retribution, fear of a world collapsing around them. At the center of the chaos, Hitler's world shrank to a bunker. As Soviet forces closed in, news grew darker by the hour. Promised relief armies never arrived, allies defected or disappeared. On April 29th, Hitler married Eva Braun in a brief ceremony underground, a gesture heavy with symbolism and finality. The next day, April 30th, as Soviet troops fought within a few hundred meters of the Reich's chancellery, Adolf Hitler took his own life. His death did not stop the battle. Fighting continued above ground, even as the regime that started the war ceased to exist. Command structures fractured, some units surrendered, others fought on, unwilling or unable to accept the end. One final symbol remained: the Reichstag. Though largely symbolic by 1945, the Reichstag building represented the heart of Nazi power in the Soviet imagination. Capturing it became a mission of immense importance. Soviet troops stormed the structure through withering fire, advancing up staircases littered with debris and bodies. After brutal close-quarters fighting, the red flag was raised over the shattered building. The image would circle the world. By May 2nd, organized resistance in Berlin collapsed. German commanders surrendered the city. The guns fell silent, leaving behind a landscape of devastation almost beyond comprehension. Berlin was a ruin. Entire neighborhoods were flattened. Tens of thousands of civilians were dead. Soldiers lay unburied in the streets. Survivors emerged cautiously from cellars, blinking into daylight that revealed a city unrecognizable from the one they had known. For Germany, the war was effectively over. Days later, May 7th, unconditional surrender was signed. The cost of Berlin 1945 was immense, not just in lives lost, but in what it represented. It was the violent end of a regime built on ideology, terror, and conquest. The city that had symbolized Nazi ambition became the grave of the Third Reich. But victory carried its own scars. The Soviet triumph came at enormous human cost, and the suffering of civilians would continue long after the fighting ended. Berlin would not simply rebuild. It would be divided, reshaped, and burdened with memory. The battle marked more than the end of World War II in Europe. It marked the beginning of a new global order, one forged from the ruins of a city torn apart by total war. Berlin 1945 stands as a warning etched in stone and ash. When wars are fought without restraint, when power demands everything, cities do not fall quietly. They're destroyed slowly, brutally, and completely. And long after the guns fall silent, the echoes remain.